Yeah, I think that the apocalyptic side of it, or the apocalyptic sort of suspicion around the paintings, is a slightly, it's misdirected. It sort of comes out of the slightly entropic feel of the scenes, you know, where things are either damaged or rotting or falling to pieces, or the guys are drunk, or, you know, the whole thing is sort of a shambles in a way. You know, whatever's happening, the spectacle that unfolds is always a bit of a shambles. And I think that leads people to believe it's a sort of end of the world negativity. But actually, for me, there's a certain joyful embrace of randomness to that. You know, that I actually enjoy. There's a sort of laughing in the face of a kind of unraveling, which I think is quite an artistic state of mind itself. You know, I find as an artist, I'm drawn to sort of the surprises that the process brings. You know, I make paintings because they didn't exist before, and that's a kind of addiction to the future. You know, it's a way of wanting to see something come to life that didn't exist before. And within that, there is a kind of destruction. There is a kind of, you know, there is a relationship to time passing and things falling to pieces. You know, there is a very implicit relationship to destruction in that, and my scenes, I think, are kind of comedies around that, in the sense, in the, you know, the old sense of it, where you know, you're trying to you know, detail a very human truth about the sort of mortality, but also in the up-to-date sense, where I think they're kind of funny. You know, some of the scenes are ridiculous and comical, and I like to build those things in, because to me that's the fun of creativity. That's what it's all about, really, is having something which you which can bring levels of feeling and levels of relationship to the surface. You know, I find them funny and ridiculous, but also atmospheric and a bit sad and a bit creepy or whatever. And you know, I like to get all that going all at once, really. And I think comedy is you know, to me, is a big part of what motivates them, even if it doesn't come across to the viewers. You know, in a way, for me, you know, the idea of them being at the end of the world is, in a way, the beginning of something else. You know, that what the figures and the characters are experiencing is is the end of maybe a bad moment and the beginning of a better one. You know, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but it's almost like how creativity hinges upon those moments itself. Like your painting is always a bad painting until the end, and that's kind of what the guys in the paintings experience too. They don't get away with it. They get to experience the same thing as I do. You know, I have a thing in the studio where I feel like that they're not even paintings until they're done. That they're still open to being sort of torn off or painted over or whatever. They're not. They don't really exist until the final moment. And I think somehow that's where the apocalyptic thing comes from. That the characters are kind of waiting for the painting to be told that the thing is done and everything's going to be okay. But as far as where they stand now, they haven't been informed of that. So yeah, I sort of resisted including women in the paintings for a long time, because I didn't want to make any comments about people who, you know, I was really interested in it being about my relationship to painting, which is clearly not, it's not about men and women sort of existing. It's not something I kind of I wanted to introduce, but actually I've brought that along because in a way it gives the figures who are male a sort of even more ridiculous feel. You know, they suddenly appear like, you know, the chauvinists of art history. You know, the sort of the Degas kind of, you know, screaming kind of chauvinist type of kind of male artist. That kind of narrative suddenly starts to come into it when the women appear, and I think that kind of works quite well. It sort of gives them a sort of a slightly debased character, I think, because the women in the paintings are usually, you know, kind of ignoring what's going on a little bit, and I don't know why that is. It's just that they seem to suggest a bit more about, that they kind of seem to make suggestions about how they fit into the painting, which is kind of out of my control in a way. And that's ultimately all I'm looking for, is to put images in which just change how everything relates in the painting. You know, whether it's, you know, objects or animals or people or sort of hybrid things. You know, it always sort of throws a different spin on what's really happening in there already. And I think what's nice about the women is that they kind of make the male characters a little bit more abject, a little bit more out of control. And I don't really know why that is, but my goal is always to introduce things that I don't understand, how they work in the painting, and then learn about it through making it, so that the characters or the items tend to stick around for a few years, and then they just leave. You know, they kind of get worked out, and then I understand it, and then they go, and then something else comes in. It's really a kind of curiosity shop in a way. My whole project is about learning about images and learning about my own relationship to them. So although I'm always quite cautious about what comes in, there's always just something new that pops in that I get fascinated by. And there's a new sequence and someone else is in town and it's all different. And then I just have to kind of work it through with that.